May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you and to you alone, O God, my Redeemer, my Sustainer. Amen. So when I was in elementary school, I had some really great teachers. I actually loved going to school. My favorite, though, was my sixth grade teacher, Ms. Dumas. She was just amazing. She was good at teaching, but she also saw each one of her students. And she also saw into me what I was capable of. And when I didn't do very well on some of my English worksheets around the weeks surrounding my father's death, she didn't count it against my final grade. She saw who I was and what I could do and knew that she needed to honor that. And it was such a beautiful encouragement to me. But it was in about fifth grade that a few of us were pulled aside to take this IQ test, and I have no idea what it was. But there were four of us, 2 boys and 2 girls, who were recommended for this gifted and talented pilot program focusing on science and math. And I loved it. It was great. I learned a lot of stuff, and it felt so good to have, that concentrated time placed on me. But I also felt that somehow I had fooled them. Have you ever had that with you? That when you get something, you feel like you fooled people. I felt like that. Or that they were just being nice to include me with my friend, Patty Derry, because I thought she was so smart, and I didn't believe that I was. So this feeling continued into junior high and high school. While I was in a number of accelerated or AP classes, I always felt stupid. My comprehension was high, and I grasped the concepts for sure, but my reading speed was a lot slower than my classmates. And because my performance was fine, nobody thought that anything was up, right? Until I had kids who went to school. And when their teachers started telling me that perhaps she should be in a different reading group for a while, or, and let's sign some papers that have this code on it and will be registered with the school system. And maybe he should not advance to first grade because he can't pronounce yellow. So they were evaluated, and both turned up similar things: very high conceptual comprehension, low reading speed, and maybe a little stutter in there. So I did some investigation. It turns out that these are classic characteristics of dyslexic processing. And God sent me this book called The Dyslexic Advantage. And I knew that my brain is also dyslexic processing. What is more, I discovered all the ways that this way of processing information and data is a distinct advantage in comparison to linear thinkers who can certainly memorize and categorize, pass the tests, say all the right things, but I could never do that. But because the brains that process as dyslexic, their neuronal clusters, they're shown to be just a little bit farther apart than those who are not dyslexic processing. So it can make connections along the way that you wouldn't normally make if your brain was like normal. I think a lot of us probably have a little bit of this anyway, but some it comes out more than others. But it creates all this space to do something interesting and new that you wouldn't do if you're just memorizing things or just gathering the information. In autism, there's a tendency for more of the clusters to concentrate in one area, and it makes it more difficult to make some of the connections like social cues, processing emotion, and that kind of thing. And it's fascinating what our brains can do. But once I changed my perspective on this way of thinking, I was able to, early on, speak beauty and creative imagination. This is, some of you might have seen this in my office. It's my favorite because I'm like, what's the deal with that? because I'm seeing it as I heart dyslexia. But yeah. But I was able to early on speak beauty and creative imagination into my children as they navigated the public school system in a number of states, and having to do this over and over again. It's still hard, for sure, but Lysander's even said that he loves his way of processing things, and he even thinks of it as a superpower. And I agree. What I once considered broken became a blessing. Dyslexia heart. And even though I felt defective and stupid, slow, not enough, now I'm grateful. Yeah. Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was a blind man. He was sitting by the roadside begging. Jesus, the disciples, and a large crowd were coming out of Jericho. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." But they ordered him to be quiet. Maybe they were embarrassed, or they didn't want Jesus to be bothered. Or maybe they held him in such contempt that they didn't think him worthy of Jesus' attention. Who knows? Might have been all of those things. But he persisted. He cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus heard him. Jesus stopped right there and told them to bring Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, to him. So they did, saying to him, "Take heart, get up. He's calling you." And this is quite something. Excuse me. A beggar will have everything with him or her, everything that they own. There's no bank to deposit any money that they get, or a home to keep their earnings. That he had a cloak likely meant that he would sit on it and there would collect the things that people would offer to him. So when Mark tells us that he threw off his cloak, sprang up and came to Jesus, we need to understand that Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, left all of that, everything behind, even the coat off his back, knowing that all of it would be gone if he returned to that spot. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." And immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. He didn't even look back. He just went. His blindness was considered a defect, brokenness, to the disciples and even to the man, likely. But because he couldn't see, his hearing was acute. He could hear even better. He also couldn't see the disdain and the contempt and the embarrassed looks on the faces of those obscuring Bartimaeus' path to Jesus. So he had very little to lose also, and he had everything to lose. And he persisted. Take heart, get up. He's calling you. And in the presence of Jesus, Jesus sees him. And now Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, sees Jesus. A blessing. Congratulations. And he follows. Was Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, in his blindness, unable to see where the blessing already was within himself at that point? The disciples actually made it more difficult for him to focus on Jesus. Within, the spark of who God is within, too, by dismissing him. Indeed, they attempted to obstruct Jesus' line of sight to him. This blind man, he had a name. And Mark says it twice, because Bartimaeus is the Hebrew way of saying son of Timaeus. And he says it together. to be clear, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, he had a name, and he was somebody. In fact, this man understands the theology of the Messiah, right? He calls Jesus son of David. He knew the whole line of succession and what it meant. He heard about Jesus, heard Jesus coming, dismissed by the crowd, considered a failure, broken, becomes an object of blessing, and only has eyes for Jesus. Max, my oldest daughter's boyfriend, he's like 6'9". He's a pilot and can go anywhere in the world, basically. And this is in Andorra, I believe. And I loved this. I found he had posted on Instagram, and he had a caption. He said, "If you're a surrealist symbol," which is what this statue is about, "if you're a surrealist symbol of the collapse of our notions of cosmic order, I'm a surrealist symbol of the collapse of our notions of cosmic order." So my daughter is my height, like 5'4", and he's 6'9", and I imagine they have this sense of feeling like this surrealist kind of distorted height difference or whatever, but way of being in this world. But I love that idea of noticing that we have perceptions about a thing and make assumptions, and then when they're mixed up, it can cause us problems. But he's seeing this as a blessing, as a way of seeing, okay, I might also be a little distorted or whatever, but I'm also whole and I'm somebody. Job, too, grew up on the stories of God, listening to the oracles recite the wisdom passed down from generation to generation, as he taught his own children the same things. He believed it all. And then tragedy struck repeatedly and ran into a knife 10 times. He had it coming. Has anyone seen the musical Chicago? Oh. Okay, thank you. Yay. Somebody besides my daughter understands. But repeatedly, it felt like he was running into a knife. Each "I alone escaped to tell you" was a stab. Sabaeans stole your oxen and donkeys and killed your servants. Stab. Fire burned your sheep and the servants. Stab. Chaldeans stole your camels and killed the servants, all these servants. Stab. Your children had a dinner party and a tornado leveled them all. Stab. And finally, his body is afflicted, head to toe. Stab, stab, stab. And then each companion systematically enumerating all the ways it is Job's fault he's in this position. Stab, stab, stab. Job is weary, spent. He knows what he heard about God, but wondering why he can't hear God right now. And then 38 chapters in, God does finally speak up. But instead of answers, God asks the question, where were you? Where were you when everything was sung into being? When everything became and everything becomes and creates and recreates? Where were you when all of this happened? And Job is duly chastised. That is, Job remembers who God is and who he is in relationship to God, not to anyone else. Job has a name, and he's somebody. So Job answered the Lord, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. And to your question, who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? I say, therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand. Things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. And then you said to me, hear and I will speak. I will question you and you declare to me. And Job says, yeah, you're right. I had heard of you by the hearing of my ears, but now I see you. You matter. I saw this another. Instagram's great. You can see some really interesting things, but also some really profound things, and I love this. You matter unless you multiply yourself by the speed of light, then you energy. Get a little physics in there, but that's who we are. We are so much more than just matter. We are the energy. We are enlivened by the Spirit of God. Thank you. Yes, amen. Job's so-called advisors said a lot of stuff that wore him down and eventually provoked Job to demand God show God's self, to answer Job, or to at least be able to make his case. Job forgot who he was because most of his belief was academic. It's what he heard. Sure, he recognized God in all the blessings that he had, right? But it wasn't until he was utterly broken that he saw God. And what a blessing that he could in that brokenness. I don't think that most of us would have to look very far to see something broken about ourselves. I don't. The problem is that we see it as brokenness. That is, whatever it is that wounds, the relationships that have harmed, the disabilities that inhibit, these things, they are part of us. A reality of our existence here. But the breaking, that happens when we can't see Jesus in it, with it, alongside it. So our family played this game the other night called Hunt a Killer. So we were to solve this problem, this crime that happened in the 1930s. It involved a cane and a gemstone. Anyway, they provided a forensics report and included definitions of the medical terms that were used to describe it. One was green stick fracture. I've never heard of that before. What it means is when a bone bends and then cracks, as opposed to a total break in the bone. And it often occurs in children because it's more malleable, more bendy. It should be anyway. I imagine this is what happens when we see Jesus in the trauma. The bone bends. There's flexibility. And sometimes it cracks. And sometimes it's not as flexible, and there is a total break. And then we're forced to stop and to see Jesus, who sees us and mends the bone, right? And sometimes the healing isn't as expected. But like Jacob, whose name means supplanter, trickster, struck on the hip bone as he wrestles with God, probably asking the question, how do I reconcile the fact that I am a trickster, my own name exposing me? But he emerges with a permanent limp. But then he's called by a different name. Israel, father of a nation, a blessing. He becomes an object of blessing who then blesses the family, carries it on. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. This Jesus, who is always living to make intercession for us. All of the priests that ever came before him did not take that role by an oath from God, but this Jesus, who never dies, God did swear with an oath to make this Jesus a priest forever, perpetual, never-ending, living forever, lives to make things right between us and God, and between us and each other, and us and creation. Jesus lives to do this and be this always, perpetually, forever and ever, and always to mend our bones, heal our brokenness, and make us a blessing. So I wonder, how do we obstruct the vision of Jesus to others, or others to Jesus? The line of sight. How do I obstruct God's line of sight to me? What do I do to do that? How might we, you and me, hear that Jesus is near, and then have the courage to ask Jesus, make me to see again? Maybe even every morning and noon and dinner. Make me see again. The Episcopal Bishop Michael Curry says this: I've come to see that the call of God, the love that bids us welcome, is always a call to become the true you. The trueness of who you are, that God has made beautifully and wonderfully. Someone made in the image of God, deserving of and receiving love. So there's this Jewish proverb: before every person there marches an angel proclaiming, behold the image of God. Isn't that gorgeous? Imagine that. If we could imagine that, an angel going before us saying, behold, an image of God. A blessing. Unselfish, sacrificial living isn't about ignoring or denying or destroying yourself. It's about discovering your true self, the self that looks like God, and living life from that grounding, fully alive. Not only that, loving each other liberates the true self when we love each other, so that we can more fully live and discover that place, as Frederick Buechner puts it, where your deep gladness and the world's great hunger meet. That's fully living. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends, those who laughed and scorned him. Job prayed for them. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And then the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Out of our brokenness, individually and as a church, God is always in the process of blessing. Do you see it happening? I am seeing it happening. What might you do to clear the way, to clear the view of people in our community, their line of sight to Jesus? What is something that you might do? And I encourage you to write it down so you don't forget. And there's a place in the notes part of the app, too, if you want to do this. But we already have donations coming in for this recording studio. We already have, if you haven't met this person right over here, his name is Mitch, who is considering taking part in the art arm of the youth center. And we have all sorts of things that we need to purchase, but we already are getting donations. People are donating these like really hefty things that we don't even have to pay for? What are ways that maybe you can become a part of making this work and run? Because we also need people who are willing to come and just oversee when there are youth there and one of us can't be there, and to record or to play on the games or to do other aspects of the art. And there was another thing, and I didn't write it down. I'll think of it and shoot it out to you through the app. If you don't have the app, get it now. Consider the angels congratulating you, blessing, God's blessing on you. You are an object of God's blessing. And now you have the energy and the courage. You have the line of sight to Jesus who sees you. Be this. Holy God, you are a God of blessing. The entire scriptures that we read is all about your faithfulness to blessing us and helping us to see again and again and again that blessing. And giving us the courage to live fully into who you've made us to be. And we are grateful. Amen.
This song speaks of both blessing and brokenness, and this is my most favorite hymn, and it's a wonderful song of crying out to the Lord and thanking the Lord and seeking the Lord. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my...
I love the poem about the Hound of Heaven. Have any of you guys read that? It's gorgeous, but it's all just about God. It's like the Hound of Heaven, always coming after us, after us. When we don't sense the presence of God, God still is present. And so this is my prayer for you, that you would continue to remain with eyes wide open and have eyes for Jesus and go and be that blessing as you are blessed. And may you walk at the pace of grace as you do it. Go on.
Teach us your